You read the title right. Limbus Company is still in the tutorial phase of the game. I'm going to prove it to you by showing you the patterns of Project Moon's previous 2 games, discuss what we've seen of Project Moon's plans for the future through in-game and out-of-game information, and predict what the basic structure of Limbus's future arcs will be. Spoilers for the entire series, of course. First, let's define some terms, because I actually completely lied. A tutorial is the section of the game in which direct instructions are given to the player. Tutorials aren't just at the start of the game, they can be anywhere where a new mechanic is added. What I actually mean is that we're still in the game's introduction phase, where mechanics are kept simple in order to allow the player to practice before things really hit the fan. The training wheels part of the game, really. There's still plenty of player agency, but the game isn't throwing its full force at you just yet. So, how can we tell when we've left that stage, or predict when it will be? Limbus is an ongoing game, and it's hard to tell what the game will look like so many years down the line. Well, there's 2 other games in the series that we can look at. Starting with LobCorp, when do the training wheels come off here? I'd say it's around the time of day 21. Some might say it's when you first get your Aleph, but that can happen as early as day 13, and I don't find there's a significant change in difficulty or design philosophy around that time. Day 21 unlocks a lot of things for you. It unlocks the central command team, which not only breaks some of the game's established patterns by having 2 departments within itself, but also presents a notable new challenge in its massive size, which makes unit positioning very important and physically separates the later departments from the ones that came before. On top of this, you unlock the Dusk Ordeals, and with it, Malkuth's Suppression. The core suppressions are the real test of skill in LobCorp. They're the boss battles, and you don't even get to any of them until this point. And then you've got the Bullets, a new tool for micromanaging your facility that requires more resource management. It's the second to last mechanic introduced into the game. Besides more bullets, all you really get in terms of new tools is the Rabbit Team, which is also pretty soon depending on your choices. With all this in mind, you're also getting way more Vav and Aleph Abnos, with a good chance that you get your first Aleph within the central department itself. So, yes, a big set of changes that both introduces new mechanics and tests your mastery of old mechanics. And when does this happen? Well, technically, day 21 is 40% of the way through the game. More than a third, right? Well, anyone who's played LobCorp will tell you no, that's not the case at all. Days get long as the game progresses, and if you're bad at the game or just really far in, a single day can take multiple hours over many attempts. I wouldn't even say day 21 is 20% of the way through the game when it comes to actual playtime. Moving to Ruina, when do training wheels come off here? You could say it's at Urban Plague when the game opens up to 4 options at a time, giving you passive attribution as a new mechanic to master, and you get your first real boss fights. However, I'd say that isn't quite where the difficulty spikes. Most encounters aren't that bad, and you're still gathering key pages and figuring out which passives to apply. When I think the game really picks up is at Urban Nightmare. You've had time to figure out passive attribution, there are some tough fights right off the bat with puppets and sweepers, and you quickly unlock realizations, Ruina's counterpart to core suppressions, which in turn unlock Ego, the last big mechanic to learn. Again, exactly how far this is through the game is hard to say, but there's a reason people say, jokingly or not, that Star of the City and beyond is more than half the game. Ruina is long, and its endgame keeps stretching on, with tons of difficult fights you'll be trying multiple times and managing tons of different builds for. All things considered, the start of Urban Nightmare is a little over a third of the game, in my opinion. A nice point at which you can say you've gotten good at the game, and it's around the time the game is really starting to pick up narratively too, having just handled Philip and Lovetown, with the 8 o'clock circus just around the corner. Okay, now where is our cutoff point in Limbus? Well, there's a justification for saying it's at Kanto 6. It's around halfway through the main 12 Kantos, or if you count by seasons, 1/3. The power creep of IDs gets pretty substantial from here on out, with a lot of new mechanics being tried out. The plot is getting into some pretty crazy territory, with Virgilius even stepping in, and we've got a new mechanic being introduced with Durante. It's a pretty solid contender for all of the points I spoke about earlier, and indeed I think it's the end of the introduction period. For Inferno itself. Remember that big old button on the drive menu that you use to select your chapter? Yeah, that little buddy implies the existence of Purgatorio and Paradiso chapters of Limbus Company, based on the books of the Divine Comedy. And indeed, Kim Ji-hoon has confirmed the existence of these chapters, along with the statement that Limbus Company could go on for another 10 years in one of the first roadmap live streams. So I don't think it's exactly groundbreaking to say that Purgatorio will likely be where the game really picks up, with the second Smoke War being the most likely decisive change. The real question is, how will this affect the game's format as a whole? Well, I can get into the exact story details another time, but I'll summarize like this. I think Diaz is going to hand over the keys of the company once Dante reaches a point of self-sufficiency, throwing them right back into the deep end, this time with more agency. Diaz will come back eventually to reap her harvest, but until then, she has more important matters to attend to elsewhere. The second Smoke War starts, and we get a time skip during which each sinner gets a new look, and starts to form their own little sub-factions, like how a certain Sinclair had his Abraxas chariots. With the new Smoke War underway, we could have storylines that take place in multiple districts at once, and events that start out seemingly unrelated converging into one big plot twist, and Dante's new Malkuth ability sure does help with that. How is Purgatorio going to be structured? Will we get another 12 Kantos for each sinner? Hell no. Limbus is meant to go on for a while, but that's more than 6 years for Purgatorio alone. Besides that, the sinners taking turns in a predetermined path works very well for Inferno, where the entire point is to be a scheme meant to grow the sinners' abilities and resolve some of their issues. But in Purgatorio, where Dante and the sinners are likely going to have far more agency in the story, it would be incredibly immersion-breaking to have this very set split of who actually gets a say in what's going on. Instead, I expect maybe 7 Kantos, likely with one focusing on each sin, with 2 or 3 sinners taking the spotlight on the promotional material each season. This gives us 3 to 4 years of Purgatorio, not overstaying its welcome, but still with enough time to get things done. Keep in mind, this will be around the same length as the entirety of Limbus Company so far, from Kantos 1 to 9, and since we're past the exposition, a lot can happen in this time frame. I think a format like this would breathe new life into the game as a whole. Limbus has had an incredible story so far, even though the basic structure has been on rails. What madness could happen when the real stakes of the story have been unveiled, and the sinners stop being observers in their own stories? Anyway, let's talk mechanics for a moment. As I established, there's going to be a new set of mechanics through which we can express our own ways of playing the game. Firstly, in terms of old stuff, I think we're hitting a level cap after Faust's Canto of level 80. This is the level that a certain Sinclair rests at, and it gives us a 10-level gap between us and the max level fighters we've seen so far at level 90, so Morositas can still have a solid use case. This doesn't mean we won't be able to level up past this eventually, but it gives us a nice rest point where we're no longer progressing rapidly, and can instead focus on more horizontal methods of progression. For Ego, I hear a lot of people say that Aleph won't show up until the start of Purgatorio, but that sounds anticlimactic to me. Either we get Aleph alongside a bunch of other mechanics and it gets overshadowed, or it's something that is meant to be a standout feature and is boring because it's just the tier after VoV. I think Aleph Ego should arrive in Kanto 10, though I'm mixed on whether it will actually happen, given many Sinners have only one VoV, but also Marceau has 2 VoVs already, so maybe they want to make it more exciting? Who knows? But if we don't see Aleph's by Otis's Kanto, I will be kinda disappointed. As for what new mechanics I expect to see, I do hope for something to customize your loadout beyond what IDs and Ego you have equipped. Being able to slot in an extra passive or two onto each Sinner would be quite nice. Whether this be with some sort of new item or a new passive you can get from different IDs of the same Sinner, there are options for how this could work. What I really expect though is a new game mode. With us going to war, I expect these Sinners to be able to take command of small squadrons, and for Dante to send them out individually on missions, with some kind of large-scale strategy game mode used both in story and as a repeating game mode to play between story updates. I'd like to see the ability to use generic units and ally units alongside Sinners, having to decide whether to load up one team with Sinners and leave the rest as the weaker generics, or spread out 2 or 3 Sinners to help each team. We could also use the upcoming auto-battler system to make the game mode more about the overall command than about normal combat. I'm not too excited about an auto-battler on its own, but I think it would work really well as part of a wider game mode with more things to keep track of. Whatever the case, we are in for a wild ride, and I want to talk about it more. I've gone over the broad strokes of what I expect today, and a lot of pretty safe predictions. But I also want to go into specifics on how each Sinner is going to react to the war and what role they play. So stay tuned for that, and I will see you next time. Bye bye!